now, images of men detained in huge numbers by the Israeli military and stripped to their underwear, blindfolded as well as kneeling on the street, have circulated on social media.
Yes, the IDF claim the men are captured Hamas terrorists, but several have questioned if the extreme and humiliating measures were necessary.
Well, joining us is Professor Eugene Kantorowicz, Director of International Law at the Coquette Policy Forum. Thank you so much for your time. Is there an element of this that feels more like revenge and perhaps a sense, perhaps a justified sense that the Israeli people have for retribution rather than strictly necessary in a military operation?
So these are military-aged men, which Israel has detained on suspicion of being members of Hamas. And I think it doesn't look like revenge if you put it in context. And the context is how the UK, how the United States militaries in Afghanistan and Iraq deal with people who may be suspected terrorists. And in all those contexts, militaries have had people take off their clothes because I think it's not out of the question that Hamas, a terrorist organization which tortures, rapes, dismembers civilians, hides in hospitals, hides in ambulances, may have some people surrender with potentially weapons on them or even suicide vests, which have also been found in Gaza Strip. So the question is, what's the other way to find out? Are you going to send them a questionnaire? Are you going to give them a poll, an affidavit to fill out? And that is why both the United States and the UK do measures like this also.
It's quite shocking to see the photos. It's interesting that the Israeli government shared these photos so widespread on social media. It does open up Israel and its military efforts, well, opens up to more criticism. Can we be sure whether those in these pictures are Hamas, are extremist terrorists, or whether they are civilians? That's the question that many people are asking. Who exactly are these people that have been stripped and are being held in this way?
It's the question that Hamas forces us to ask, because, of course, Hamas has put us in this situation by not wearing uniforms, by routinely walking around ununiformed, attacking Israelis while dressed as civilians, that you can't assume the fact that someone does not have a uniform is a civilian. Now, these were a group of military-aged males, only military-aged males, a large group who were together in one place in an area of Gaza which had been largely evacuated by civilians, as I understand. So that certainly provides a reason to stop and find out, just like the United States or the UK would do in Afghanistan and Iraq. But certainly, I don't think none of them are going to be punished or detained extensively without inquiry to find out whether they're Hamas terrorists. But obviously, you're not just going to ask them, are you a Hamas terrorist, and do you have a suicide?
It's such a difficult job for Israel here because clearly sometimes there is a very blurred line between someone who might have stood on the side of the street and in a sort of awful and inhuman way cheered on a Hamas terrorist dragging a hostage through the street, as we saw many streets in Gaza, people on the sides of the street acting like that. But I suppose in Nazi Germany, there were many civilians who attended Nuremberg rallies. Perhaps that's an apt comparison. Those civilians who've expressed support for evil, murderous barbarians, whether it's the Nazis or Hamas, I suppose ultimately these people need to go through a process of denazification. And would scenes like this help that process or hinder it?
Scenes like this will help that process because they're necessary to Israel winning the war, which denazification cannot take place unless you actually conquer Nazi Germany, for example. And if military-aged men are allowed to gather in large groups and approach soldiers, and you can't check them for bombs or weapons, I don't know. Has anyone suggested a better way of checking them for bombs for weapons? Are you going to send them to the airport metal detector? And again, this is not an unusual thing that's happened here, but because it's Israel, people try to problematize it and say it's...
Sorry to interrupt you, Professor, but we've come to the end. We've squeezed a little bit here, but thank you very much indeed for your time. Eugene Kantorowicz, Director of International Law at the Coquette Policy Forum.